Michael Lee is a sports enterprise reporter for the Washington Post, and if you checked out his story today on Joel Embiid, the remaking of one Joel Embiid, a lot to dive into on this one. He spoke to people who have been around Embiid for most of his basketball life, and it's interesting because, as I told you, I am currently reading the Built to Lose book by Jake Fisher, and I'm on the chapter where they talk about Joel Embiid and going to Kansas and, that he wanted to redshirt his freshman year because he didn't think he was good enough. And Bill Self says to him, not only are you good enough, you're going to be the first pick of the draft. So really full circle to Embiid now with some playoff failures team-wise and how he has really remade himself with Michael Lee, who has covered the NBA for a long time, and he joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as the Sixers play the Wizards tomorrow night right here on 97.3 ESPN. Michael, welcome back, man. How you been?
I've been good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and I know that, this is a great piece, about so many people, like, the Embiid thing's interesting because last year he puts up 30 points a game in the playoffs, but people don't remember he gets swept out. He's had some great games in the playoffs. He's been a dominant player, but the team kind of got beat. He's had some issues, the physical injuries, the orbital bone. A lot of people said, man, you look out of shape. So why, for you, watching this version of Joel Embiid, does he seem to be a different version of Joel Embiid?
Well, because he's not talking it, he's walking it. I think past, it's almost like he was trying to convince himself that he was as good as he was, because he would kind of be filled with bluster and, just kind of stick out his chest and say, I want to be MVP and I'm the best player in the world. And he was doing it in a individual's perspective, like he was going out there getting 30 points, 15 rebounds, and having these great games. But it didn't necessarily translate to the ultimate team success, and he didn't always step up when his team needed him the most, especially in the fourth quarter. And I think that, after you've kind of been kicked in the face a couple of times, it sort of hits you that you can't keep doing things the same way. And I think for him, last year against Boston and losing that series, not having Ben Simmons around, I think he gained an appreciation of Ben and what he can actually bring to the table. But it also made him understand that it takes a team. And the Sixers did right by him. They got the right supporting cast. They got, the right coach, the one who could help bring out the best of Tobias Harris to where he's not just a catch and shoot player, but somebody who can actually go out there and dribble and create and get a bucket for you. And I think that, all that's kind of come together. But also, he's not the guy that's going to taunt his opponent once the game is over. He'll say what he has to say on the floor. He'll do what he has to say on the court. And then he's done. And he goes about his business. He goes home. He plays with his son. And then he goes back in the morning and does the same thing all over again. So it's just more about what matters to him and what's important to him. And he's made a priority of just, being out there and performing as opposed to talking about it.
He's interesting. He became a father, and that was recent here, and you wonder how much that has kind of factored in. A lot of people said, well, he's a father now. He sees things a lot differently. From people that you spoke to around him, how much did being a father change Joel Embiid?
Well, I think in some sense it did, in that, it gave him a structure. Like he knows that his son is going to be napping at certain times, he's going to be awake at certain times. And so he's got to be there when he's awake, and that's important time. So he'd rather spend that time with his son than being on Twitter or trying to figure out how he can troll people with some kind of funny comment or whatever. So he's dedicated in that sense. But also he's just more structured. I mean, he's just more disciplined in that respect, that he's not worrying about the ancillary stuff. His family is important to him. Arthur, the name, comes from his brother who passed, when he first made it to the Sixers, and he died in a car accident. And I think that that's something that's always stayed with him. So his family's always meant a lot. So now that he is a dad, he wants to be like his father and be a role model for the family. That's put everything in perspective for him. But that's not the reason why he's playing this way. I think it's all just a progression. I think it's all kind of comes together at the right time, and that's why it's all come together on the court the way it has, because it all adds up. It's not just one thing and say, boom, that's the change. a lot of things had to come together for Joel to sort of reach this moment.
Michael Lee's with us from the Washington Post, at Mr. Michael Lee. If you want to try to find that article, it's over at thewashingtonpost.com. It's called Focus, Fatherhood, and Fewer Tweets, the remaking of Joel Embiid. How much, because a lot of people, the Sixers were, they went through the process, and he bought into it. In fact, he shouted out Sam Hinkie the other day. He still refers himself to that. But how much of the remaking of the roster has helped Joel Embiid as well?
Yeah, I mean, the process is over. No one's going to say it in Philly, and fans are all tied into all that stuff. But the process ended like the minute Brett Brown was gone, right? That was the last real tie to that. I mean, the process was really about just tanking and acquiring assets. Well, you've already gone beyond that point now. Now you're at the point where you have your two studs, the guys that you lost all these games to get. You got two of them right now, and they're all-stars, so you're feeling good about that. But now it's about getting the right pieces around them. Last year they had the wrong pieces around them. Al Horford was a terrible fit. Like, he was not the right fit to play with Joel Embiid. But, Danny Green is not a better player, but he's a better fit.
Right.
Steph Curry is not a better player, in terms of, career stature, but he's a better fit. And so when you add guys like that, you add a guy who won a championship like a Dwight Howard, you add these guys to the team, you raise the level of professionalism for the group. You add a George Hill, a guy who's, been to the finals and has played, in big-time playoff moments. You add a maturity to the entire group that can help police the locker room. That's something they didn't really have before with the Sixers. They just had, they had Joel and Ben. They did their thing, and everybody else tried to fit in. But now that you can see that the veterans, like a guy like Danny Green, I mean, I was joking the minute that they traded for Danny Green. I was like, well, the Sixers are about to win a championship because he's been on the team that won the last two.
Right.
And, it's not because of him, but it's because of what the type of professionalism that he brings, type of leadership that he brings. Danny Green won since he was in college. He won in San Antonio. So he knows and guys respect that. If he says something, they can respect that. And so that's what's been added to the 76ers this year. So Joel knows that as a leader, he's got to show up every day because his teammates are going to demand it of him. They're not going to accept him to just, oh, you're the best player, you get away with whatever you want. No, yeah, you're the best player, but I just play with LeBron James. What are you going to say
right.
in terms of a commitment? LeBron's here every day. Like, you need to be here every day. Like, and so if you want to be on that level, then this is what you got to do. And adding guys to the locker room who have that, that have what Joel wants, in terms of a championship, that's what you need. And I think that, like I said, there weren't like big name superstar type additions, but sometimes when you just raise the level of professionalism, that's going to be what's needed to elevate your stars. And that's what the Sixers did.
Now, Michael, how much, in league circles and other teams and other players or people that you had spoke to now believe in the Sixers because of the change in Embiid? Like, we all know in the NBA, you have to have that star. You have to have the guy who you can say is the best player on the best team. And how many of those guys exist in the league? 3, 4, maybe 5? Is Joel Embiid now one of those guys? And how do people around the league, do they perceive him differently watching him this year?
Well, I think everyone has known for a long time that he's a beast. From the moment he first got on the court, he's somebody that went out there and was a dominant figure, and he just elevated everybody around him just by his mere presence. So I think the respect is there. Everyone knows that he has every tool in the chamber. It just, does he have the focus? Is he disciplined enough? Is he going to have the be in shape? Is he going to have the stamina to be there in the fourth quarter? He wants to be the guy to take the clutch shots. But if he's gasped for air in the fourth quarter when it becomes crunch time, can he trust him? And so I think that's the one thing that the sort of the questions that sort of surrounded Joel Embiid is like, yeah, he's great. He's a great talent, but can you trust him to be healthy when it matters? Is he going to get hurt? Is he going to break down? And I think those are the questions that he still has to answer. But talent-wise, no one's denying that he's one of the top players in the game. I mean, he's a top 3 MVP finalist, and no one's going to deny that, when he got hurt, he probably was the number 1 favorite to win the award. But it's not just about that. It's just about what other questions can you answer? Can your dominant rub off to your teammates? Can it translate to you reaching the conference finals or finals for the first time? Those are the questions that Joel has to answer. But I think he's been answering all the other questions or any doubts about his physical ability from the moment he stepped on the court.
That being said, Michael, I know you know the Wizards well, and you watch Game 1. I don't know that the Wizards have an answer for Joel Embiid, but do they have another way that they can attack this Philadelphia team, which I know just running into you at games in the past, you've seen a lot of this Sixer team through the last couple of years, and why this team's roster, as we kind of hinted at, is so much better. It would seem that a team like the Wizards, who have two unique star players, they've got two of them, but it seems like they are a little limited after that to make this a series.
Well, they're limited in terms of star power, but they're not limited in terms of tenacity and just the way they attack the game. The pace is what's going to be what I think allows the Wizards to make this a competitive series, and why the game one was closer than maybe a lot of people thought. They are relentless. They push it. When you got guys like Bradley Beal and Russ Westbrook, two really fiery, competitive guys, they're not going to let the team kind of roll over and get blown out. I mean, I think one of the more impressive stats about that closing stretch when they went 17-6 is that I think only one of those losses was by more than 5 points. Like they were every game was close. Even their losses came down to the last possession. So they're going to be in every game. Even if they lose, they're going to find a way to compete. They're going to find a way to go out there and make sure that you feel their presence and their intensity when they go out there and play. So it's not going to be an easy series just because of the way the Wizards compete. Remember like in the process days when the Sixers, stunk, they lost all those games, but they were competitive because all these guys were just fighting for their jobs and fighting for their lives. The Wizards sort of have that mentality because Russ has that mentality. Russell Westbrook has the mentality of a guy on a 10-day contract. Even though he's making $40 million a year, he goes out there and plays like, I might get cut tomorrow. And when you have one of your best players, and he has that level of intensity and drive, that rubs off on everybody. And that's why the Wizards, even if it's a 4-game series, 5 games, 6 games, they're going to be a tough out just because of the way they approach basketball collectively.
Yep, and they fought hard that first game, just too much Embiid, but you could easily almost write an article similar about Tobias Harris and the way that he has changed his game, because it seems that, I don't want to know that focus is really the problem, but definitely a different mentality, a more decisive player.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, he also is being utilized correctly. It's almost like I remember when he first got traded there and they sort of made him a spot-up shooter and the guy who stretched the floor. And I was just like, Did the Sixers watch him play with the Clippers? Like, do they realize what they acquired? Do they have a clue about what he's all about? Because Doc Rivers used him in pick-and-roll situations. Doc Rivers made him a playmaker. Doc Rivers put the ball in his hands and sort of let him make decisions and go out there and play. The Sixers took the ball out of his hands. They just kind of had him floating around there, and he never really looked like himself. He never felt comfortable. This year, Doc has sort of said, okay, we're not looking to Ben to score. We're not going to ask Ben to be a scorer. He doesn't want to be a scorer. He wants to be a defensive player. He wants to be an assist man. He wants to do all the other things to fill the stat sheet. So we need somebody on this team who can go out there and get a bucket for us. Tobias, do it. Can you do it?
Right.
And Tobias has wanted to do it. He's wanted to be in this position. And he's got a coach that he trusts, that he already has a prior relationship with, who understands him, who knows him, and can come up with a scheme that's going to bring out the best in him. And you see that. You see that Tobias is playing with the confidence because he knows that he's got a coach that knows who he is, that knows what he can bring to the table, and then wants to, elevate him and accentuate all those talents as opposed to try to turn him into something that he's not.
Michael Lee, he's at Mr. Michael Lee. We'll leave you with this because you mentioned it. They don't want Ben Simmons to score. They don't need him to score. When you got Curry and Green combining for 26 and 6 threes, that's an extension of Ben Simmons doing his job. It's hard for a lot of people to understand that. But
True.
As this coaching staff kind of come to terms with, Ben Simmons doesn't want to be a scorer, so we're not going to ask him to be a scorer.
Yeah, I think they've come to terms as long as he brings it in the areas they need him to bring it. I've always been like this. I don't really care about Ben shooting threes. I don't really care about Ben shooting jumpers. I just want Ben to play with the level of energy and intensity that he has to play with.
Right.
Like Russell Westbrook is going to make mistakes, right? He's going to have, games where he's like a turnover crazy. He's going to shoot poorly, but that every night you're going to get a full effort from him. The problem with Ben is that you might get numbers, but you may not get the effort. With Ben, he has to make sure that the other team feels him, or it's not really worth. He's not really doing what his job is. His job is not to score. His job is to make sure that he shuts down, the best perimeter player. And I thought he did a great job on Russell Westbrook last game. And so, but I think that overall, as long as he plays and competes and doesn't, cheat, the game, by not bringing it, then I think that they'll be satisfied with whatever the box score says.
Right.
And that's what they need from him.
No doubt. Now, Michael, the Lakers, the Nets, I guess the Jazz and the Suns are the 1 and the 2. People like the Clippers. The Bucks are in the mix. In your mind, is this Sixer team a legitimate NBA championship contender?
I don't see it right now. I still look at Milwaukee and Brooklyn as the teams to beat in the East right now, just because they have players who've done it. They have players who, they're top line players. I can look at their resumes and say, at least when it comes to the Nets, I say, well, this guy won championships. This guy been to the conference finals. I can see that. With the Bucks, I can see a team that's just hungry for a breakthrough. They've been getting close and close in the last couple of years, and they've got a 2-time MVP. And so I can look at those guys and say, yeah, they've done it. When I look in the Western Conference, I can look at teams and say, yeah, the Lakers have been there. And so I kind of can look at those teams and say that I would trust them more because they have more guys I can trust. The Clippers, they had Kawhi Leonard. They had a guy who won championships. So I can look at them and say, yeah, I trust them. So the Sixers, until Embiid and Simmons are on that stage and show me what they can do on this as the playoffs get deeper, then I can develop more trust in them. But right now, I'm kind of sort of taking a wait-and-see attitude with them.
All right. Tomorrow night, we'll see them in the second game against the Washington Wizards. Michael Lee is over at the Washington Post. He's at Mr. Michael Lee, and I implore you guys to check out his story on Joel Embiid. It is really well done, and, of course, Joel Embiid, a huge part of this Sixer run. If they're to make a deep one, they're going to need the best version of Joel Embiid. Michael, appreciate the time as always, man.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Michael Lee, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.